So today we did prep because.
Hello again.
So we are prepping the car. Well,
This car,
the Subaru, because we have decided to go to the Nurburgring. When we decided to go, we were going to take the Accord, but we've just decided that I'm too broke to fix the Accord.
the shopping list is a bit extensive at the moment.
Yeah, there's quite a lot to do on the Accord, so we're not going to take it to the Nurburgring. We're still going to fix it. It's just not going to be done in time for us to go to the Nurburgring. So we're going to take the Subaru instead. The Subaru needs fixing too, so, but it's not as much. So
and it'll be more practical for the trip, to be fair.
Yeah, so we can fit all that stuff in the back.
Yeah.
And so what we're going to do, there's a few little issues on the Subaru that need sorting out. One is the brakes don't work, which is quite crucial.
That's a big one. That's a big one. Yeah. We're also going to be borrowing the wheels from my Toyota for the trip because the Toyota is essentially a Subaru in a dress. So we'll be able to steal the wheels from that to get the benefit of the semi-slick tyres. So what we're going to do is test fit those today as well, just to make sure they do actually fit.
Just to make sure the offset is all right, so that we're not like catching anything on the brake calipers or anything. At least one of the brake discs is warped. They don't seem to do anything, do they? Like when
No, it was the first thing I noticed. I was like, "This is really cool. I can't stop."
Yeah. So we're probably today we might do a fluid change on it because obviously we're going to need to do that before we go. So we'll do a brake fluid change while the old brakes are on. Then
Make sure
we've got fresh fluid in, and we can just order all of the discs and pads and everything. So
yeah. You got to talk with your hands to get the message across to the public, yo. Peace.
So we've just testing the wheel off Dunk's 86 because the theory is we're going to use these on the Nurburgring. We'll probably drive on the stock WRX wheels that it's on and then switch to these, and then we've got spare set wheels if we have a blowout or anything like that. So they seem to sit a lot flusher than the crappy WRX wheels sit. I think it actually maybe even sits a bit proud, but maybe when
it'll go in a bit
once it comes down. So
centre board's fine. I know the tread's facing the wrong way. It's because it's from the other side of my car, so that will be different. They actually go on. Looks good.
But yeah, cool.
What isn't cool?
When I was driving it the other day, the reason I wanted to check that there was nothing wrong on this side was I went around the corner the other day and just had like a big. It was quite a big clunk, but it only happened once, and then I've never heard anything ever since then. I was thinking that maybe that this shock had blown like the back one has, but we got the wheel off, and straight away I noticed that we were very close to death, and this front wishbone has actually nearly snapped in half. So you can see there, it has actually cracked all the way around here. It's not showing up that well in the camera, but it is absolutely buggered. That line there is literally come apart, and the reason I think it has done it, I'll show you the other side. What happens is this one's actually all right, but you can see from factory that it is literally just a bit of sheet metal that's been welded to, and then there's a hole here as well. So I think what's happened is all the moisture's got through this hole, stored underneath, rotted this metal, and then it's just cracked through. So we're in a way really lucky that we found it before we took it on the Nurburgring, because that would have been absolutely horrendous. We're gonna have to order up a new arm. They're only 60 quid, so it's not the end of the world, but at least we saw it before something serious went wrong with it. So we're gonna just get the back end jacked up now, and hopefully we don't find anything else too severe. So we are just gonna start off by changing the brake fluid, because obviously when you're on the Nurburgring the brakes get extremely hot.
Yeah, you need to stop.
You're coming down from like 130, 140 miles an hour sometimes, so the brakes do take an absolute hammering, probably more so than any other track I've ever been on.
One thing to remember, it's a road course as well, really. So it doesn't behave the same as a track where it's nice, smooth tarmac for it to progressively brake on.
Yeah.
So it's like going absolutely 100% in your car on country roads for 10 miles.
Yeah, and the brakes, like when you're in the car park, when coming out, a lot of the cars that are like stopped with problems are
Right.
generally brake problems, like the linings have come off the pad, or like the brakes have just faded because obviously they get super hot. So we're going to put fresh fluid in, just because obviously that'll reduce the chances of the brake fluid getting too hot and us getting brake fade. So we're going to drain as much as we can out of this back caliper, and then we'll put fresh fluid in, and then just gradually bleed it through all the brakes to get fresh fluid into each caliper, and then that'll give us decent fluid so that we don't get the brake fade. And then hopefully next week the brake discs and pads will have arrived, and we can change the discs and pads. That way we know we've got decent brakes all around, and then we can actually take the old pads and stuff with us, just in case one of the pads does fail, it gets too hot,
we've got backup
or something, and we've got some spares there. Because if you go to the Nurburgring, one thing you need to know is brake pads are the most expensive thing there.
Because they know you'll go through.
Yeah, there's literally like stands on the side of the street selling EBC brake pads, and they're so expensive.
Mental.
So we took, not the time I went in the Mazda 3, but when my friend Giles used to own my Mazda 3 MPS, we went there, and the first thing that happened was the brakes failed on it. He could not find brake pads within like 100 miles of Nurburgring, and the only ones that were there were from a stand at the Nurburgring,
and they'll be like twice the retail.
Or 400 quid, yeah.
Wow.
So, definitely make sure your brakes are okay before you get
or just buy a spare set here and take them, even if they are full retail price. It'll be cheaper than there.
Oh yeah. We've got to make sure our brakes are okay, so we don't have to spend a fortune on brakes.
Yeah, please. Might just leave the car there if that happens.
Yeah. So we'll crack on with getting this fluid bled through, and then we're going to make a start and taking the suspension off and that wishbone, so that we're ready to stick fresh suspension and the wishbone and on. And then I think that is really all the prep that we need to do. Maybe change the oil and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's crack on. So what we're doing now, I've cracked the bleed nipple off, put this little bit of washer line that we had lying around to drain it into this tub. So we're just pumping a little bit out now. We won't drain it 100% out, just because then it's really hard to get all the air out later on. So we're going to drain as much as we can out. We'll top the reservoir back up, and then we'll start bleeding it all through each caliper. So I've just tightened the bleed nipple back up, and Sarah finds it really funny that it's called a nipple. So yeah, tighten that back up, and most of the fluid is out of the reservoir now, so we've not really got a lot in there. It's pretty much empty. So there wasn't full on air coming out, so we know we've still got a little bit in the caliper and the line, which is good because it means that we don't draw too much air in. So we're going to just top this reservoir right back to the top. We'll start bleeding it through, and in between each caliper we'll top it back up to keep it topped up, so it just stops us drawing air back into the system.
Sorry.
Do you mind?
Did you stop?
Yeah. So once Duncan finishes driving, we're gonna bleed the brakes. So what this does is basically gets all the air out of the lines in the brakes, and puts fresh fluid in for us as well. So we've filled it back up with fresh fluid after draining it out, and what we're going to do is Dunk is going to press the pedal to the floor. Every time he pushes it to the floor, I'm going to open the valve. That'll let some fluid out, and before he lifts the pedal back up, I'll tighten it back up. That stops it drawing any air back in, and we'll just keep repeating the process until there's no air bubbles coming out, and that there's nice fresh clean fluid coming out as well. So yeah, let's do it. Okay, down, up, down, okay. Okay, cool. So that is one brake done. We're basically just going to repeat that process on every single caliper. So basically you want to start on the caliper that is furthest away from the master cylinder. So the master cylinder on this car is obviously on the driver's side, on the opposite side of the car. So the furthest one away is the rear left, and then you go to the rear right, then the front passenger side, because that's further away again, and then the driver's side. So we're just going to do it in that order. So we're going to hop over to that side next, passenger front, driver's front, and just repeat the process basically until we've got fresh fluid in each caliper. One thing I forgot to say before is in between each caliper, just check your fluids top back up. Obviously it uses a little bit in between each one, so yeah, keep it topped up. It's better to just make sure that it doesn't get too low, because if it gets too low then you end up drawing air in and then you've got to start all over again. It's a pain in the ass. So we'll stick some fresh fluid in and then crack on with that next one. So we've finished bleeding all the brakes, and we're gonna just get this bottom arm off now. It's pretty straightforward. So we've got a bolt going through here. Dunk's just getting it out. I think the bolt goes through there into a captive nut, does it? Or is it?
Hoping
I
it's
don't know.
captive.
That's a nut for that side, isn't it? No, I don't think it's captive, is it? So yeah, there is a nut.
Put that back on.
Sorry.
You know what I'm doing occasionally.
Okay, so yeah, nut and bolt through there. Then there's just a ball joint. Ball joint goes downwards, so there's just a pinch. There's just a bolt underneath here that needs to come off with the split pin. Take that nut off, and then you've got a piece at the back, which I'm not entirely sure how you get to.
Yeah, you go up under behind the chassis then.
Yeah, so here, this is the back bolt. Basically has like a bit of threaded bar that goes through here, then a nut on the end. So just take that nut off. Once we've got everything off, it should be enough movement in it to hopefully just twist the arm out and take it out. So one thing we've just noticed is the nut on this side is pretty crusty and horrible looking, and the nut on the back of this side is really shiny, so that kind of indicates that this arm has probably been changed at some point, which explains why it's in much better condition. Don't know whether possibly the same things happened, or if they've just replaced it for the bushes or whatever, but yeah, kind of indicates that something's gone wrong there at some point, which is probably what means that this is probably the original arm as well. So yeah, at least we know this one isn't going to go this one isn't going to go wrong either. So yeah, we can kind of get away with just changing this one arm rather than the pair at the same time. I've split the bottom ball joint, that's come apart, the front nut and bolts out. I've disconnected the bottom of the anti-roll bar, and I'm just trying to get this nut off here. Oh, sorry. And it's a 22 mil, and I have lost my 22 mil spanner. There's not enough space to get a socket in. So what I'm going to do is just take this whole piece out. So there is a bolt there that goes into the chassis, and then under this plastic cover there's another one that goes in there. We'll take that off, take the whole piece out, and then if I can't get this off, because it is tight, I have got an adjustable spanner and I've tried it, but it is really tight and I don't want to risk stripping it off. So yeah, we'll get the whole piece out, and if worst comes to worst, we'll just cut the end off it so that I can keep the bush, because it looks like the bush doesn't come as part of the arm online. So yeah, we're at that point. We're just gonna take a quick break. We're on barbecue. Dunk's on barbecue duties. Yeah, so we're got barbecue fired up down here. So Dunk's just loosening all these strut bolts off so that we're ready to take that strut out. The front ones seem to be coming out relatively okay, so they're a bit rusty, aren't they?
They are quite rusty,
yeah, but the back ones are like literally seized on solid, so there's a good chance we're gonna have to cut the bolts. I've just had a look on eBay to see if the bolts are easy to get hold of, and they've sold like 400 of them, so there's a good chance that it's a common problem. And we have got this arm off, which is absolutely horrendous. Have you seen it?
Oh, that's not really part of it anymore, is it?
Yeah, we were very close to death.
Yeah, that would have been a catastrophic failure, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so that's how it sits in the car. This bit's at the back, that's at the front, and basically that is holding that to the front of the car. And it is just a tiny bit of sheet metal that's very crusty, holding it on that last bit of the way. You can see how much I can bend it there. It's not great.
Could have been designed a little bit better.
Yeah, it's a terrible design, really, isn't it? A bit of sheet metal welded together, but
Especially with it being so exposed. I mean, that whole inside of that arm is just
well,
a trap for moisture.
if you look on the other side, there's actually a hole drilled in here, so there's like literally a hole to let the moisture get inside and sit behind the weld.
It's mental.
Yeah.
Absolutely mental.
But yeah, at least we spotted it before we crashed into a fucking McLaren P1.
Yeah. That could have been a lot more expensive.
Yeah.
Our cars have got a knack of like almost trying to kill them.
yeah, we've not been having much luck recently, have we?
One day one of them will work.
So we're having a bit of a nightmare with this back shock. We've had to cut the bolt tops off because basically it's just so solid and like seized up. So I've cut the bolt tops off, and then I've had to cut a section of the shock off because I still couldn't get the bolts to move because they're actually seized in the hub. So I've cut this section off and then knocked that off, which has given me a bit more better access to the tops of these. We're going to try heating it up now and see if we can get these bolts to move because they are just seized solid. This shock's absolutely knackered anyway, so it's not a big deal. And yeah, it's only really the springs that we want to save off it because they are the ProDrive springs. The shock is just a generic shock, so there's no big deal about ruining that. So yeah, hopefully we can get it off. It's been a bit more of a pain in the arse than we thought, which is I'm glad it's happened. We've come to it now so that when we've got the suspension to go on, we can just crack on with getting it on. We're just we're getting the shock off now. Dunk's got everything off the bottom, getting everything off the top as well. Just 3 nuts around the top, and we're having a bit of a nightmare getting the back off, aren't we? So it's super tight. We've started cutting it off. We're probably going to call it a day, and we'll just finish off the back ones when we come to fit the suspension. But we've got the fronts off ready. That side is still on because we've just got it holding up the hub while we've got that bottom arm off, and then when the new suspension comes, we'll
everything's loose, ready for its coming.
Yeah, we'll fit the arm first and then take the strut off, just so that the hub's got something to rest on. But yeah, the strut's out now, so it should hopefully come out.
It's always the famous last word, isn't it? But for once,
yeah,
it is out.
And they look very Japanese and crusty, don't they? So yeah, these are the standard shocks, and obviously part of the GB270 is that they come with ProDrive springs, but they actually just use the factory shock absorbers, so they're probably very old and tired, and because of that reason we're gonna just change the whole suspension and put new struts on, and I'll just keep hold of the original ProDrive springs in case anybody ever wants to return it back to stock for whatever reason. But yeah, front suspension's off, got the arm off ready for the new arm to come. We've bled the brakes and we have made a start and taken the rear off, but it's been a bit more of a nightmare than we thought. So far I've only got the top bolt out, just because it's been a bit of a nightmare, and I've still got the bottom one to get out, but it's a bit more awkward because of the drive shaft sits behind it, so ideally, like realistically, it's made to push out that way, but I can't really get in there, so I'm gonna have to think of something to get that out. And the other side is exactly the same. The other side's just as seized up, so I need to have a bit of a think at how I'm going to get that out. But we're running out of time today, so we're going to
leave it at that. Next time we come, hopefully we'll have some suspension to fit, and we can finish getting these back shocks off and get everything fitted.
So I forgot to film an outro, but yeah, basically that is the Subaru stripped down, ready for all the parts. It is a different day today, so the parts are actually already here, and we're going to crack on with putting them on today. So make sure you tune back in the next video, and we will be fitting all the new bits and pieces to get it back on its wheels, hopefully.